Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, probably for some of you listening to this live. Good to have you here. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful day. Welcome to day 4. So, for those of you that have not been here, I saw already in the chat this morning some people saying, "This is my first day at HR Summer School." Welcome. I'm Ben Eubanks. I'll be hosting you today and tomorrow if you decide to stick around and join us like most of the attendees have. So glad to have you. Goodness, it's going to be a tremendous, tremendous day. So I mentioned this the other day. My life's mission has been to make HR better, one HR pro at a time. And I want to tell you where that came from. When I got my first HR job years ago, I was so excited. I was so thrilled. I was so pumped. I could not wait to just dive in, roll my sleeves, and help people. And someone said, "Hey, it's great to see that you're so passionate, but eventually that'll kind of fade away and you'll just kind of settle into this as a job." And I made a promise that day that I would never, ever, ever fall into that routine, that rhythm. And it's been so much fun this week to see that the people here communicating, the people here sharing, the people here that are interacting have that same kind of mindset. We are always growing. We are always have some room to develop ourselves. And the more we develop ourselves, the better we can take care of the people in our organizations. So it's so much fun to be here with you and be sharing this moment together this week. So the big 3 things, if you haven't been here again with us, we're here to educate. Lots of great content, ideas, things we share today. We're here to connect you. We're here to connect you with other people. We're here to bring you ideas and things. We're also here to inspire you. We're here to give you some inspiration, some ideas, some support, and some hope, hopefully. Okay, speaking of excitement, just a couple of the comments, things that are coming in so far. This is just in the last 24 hours, people sharing about the event. It's amazing. It's so humbling to see the kind words out there. 2 quick examples really quick, just to show you what kind of things people are saying about the event. If you have not been here again, Betty, shout out to you. She said, "Hey, I've never really been active on LinkedIn, and this week has opened my eyes. It's changed how I see this, not just how she sees this as a tool, but also how it's going to impact her career. She's going to use this." So hats off to you, Betty. Thank you for participating. We appreciate you. And then Shelly, she said, "Christine's comments the other day on organizational trauma were so profound. They've already looked for ways to start incorporating that into the conversation at her team, at her company." And that's so much fun to see us taking these ideas. The ideas are just that until we put them into practice, put them into action. So that's really incredible. Thank you to all of you for sharing. And speaking of sharing, some prizes. Love to give some of those away. First up, just want to say a congratulations. We've been giving away lots of things, and we have some more stuff to give away today and tomorrow. Lisa, Christy, Annette, Cora, Coretta, Betty, Josh, Pamela, Oriel, Ian, Assad, Sarah, and Judy. You guys all have something special waiting for you. Email Melanie at upstarthr.com. Grab a screenshot of this really quick. Email Melanie, and she will take care of you. She'll make sure you're all set up, and we'll get you your prize, your reward, your thank you from us for participating and for being an active part of this community. We really appreciate all of you for being here. This morning, you might have already seen her in the chat. She's already active and live there. Nicole Garrity is going to be helping as our moderator for the first half today. She's a marketing manager at Talview. She's the author of the most inclusive HR influencer list, where she tries to bring in a really diverse set of people that are influencing our profession and represents a broad swath of people across all colors and races and genders and all those things to try to make sure that's totally inclusive and shows the real value that we bring across the spectrum. And I appreciate her for the work she does with that. She's very passionate and brings that to the table. So she'll be in the chat today. Please say hello to Nicole as we're going through. To kick us off this morning, our first session is with Matt Burns. Matt is a former CHRO. He's a top speaker, top thinker, one of those people that I love to just kick ideas around with because he's so sharp. And I walk away from every discussion with him with some new ideas. So I know he's going to bring some good stuff. Let's jump into that fireside chat. All right. Hey, everyone. Ben Eubanks here. I'm so glad to have you back. I actually am joined by someone, I'm going to call him a longtime friend, whether he wants to take that claim or not, Matt Burns. He has had an amazing career background in HR leadership. He's a phenomenal resource. He is respected in all the right ways to be respected, both in the business space, but also within our domain in the HR space. Am I saying enough good things about you, Matt? right there.
You say friend. I've been following you around for a couple of years. Is how I remember it.
Hey, I'll take whatever you want to give me. I'll take it. So Matt Burns, welcome. I'd love to have you tell everybody a little about who you are, what you do. I gave them some good positive things about you, but tell us, who you are.
Yeah, I'll be brief. 20 years in the corporate world, 15 of those were in HR. The last 5 as an HR executive. I was the person that you'd meet at an HR conference and never know that I was in HR. I talk about business. I talk about technology. I talk about analytics, and they're all a Trojan horse to getting to culture. And I'm really lucky that I've been able to do that for 20 years with some of the biggest companies on the planet. I learned to work within constraints, which are now exceedingly important in these COVID times. And I'm really excited about what we're doing right now. We have an opportunity to really help organizations be more effective. And uh, I love making workplaces more human centric.
Awesome. Well, that's a great overview for what the conversation is going to be about. And I can't remember if we talked about this last time in the last couple of conversations we've had, but I've been saying a lot lately that for better or worse, all the things that have happened in the last couple of months have pushed violently the role of HR to the forefront. It's no longer like, hey, that person's in the back office, they're keeping us out of legal trouble. Now it's, hey, we need you in this meeting because there are big things happening and you have a valid perspective. Are you seeing that same kind of thing in the conversations you're having?
Yeah, it's funny. The question I got most before post COVID-19, aside from HR technology questions, was when is HR going to be able to take the proverbial seat at the table? It's a question I don't like answering because I believe that you should build your own table and invite people to that table. But if we follow the train of thought, a large part of why HR was being undervalued, I think, was 2 reasons. You've mentioned the first, which is the demands of the profession. So in an economic context, supply and demand, the demand of the profession was administrative, compliance focused. You were in service to completing the repetition around employee activities that other leaders didn't want to perform in some organizations. I'm painting broad strokes. There are many evolved organizations where HR is a strategic partner, but I'm speaking more in general terms. Now that inertia is gone, and there's an expectation that HR steps up to the plate, but it brings into focus, Ben, another problem, which is the other side of that equation: supply. And do we have the right skills within the HR profession to be able to meet those demands? Because if we don't, organizations will solve for it a different way. And I really want to make sure that we seize the opportunity to make workplaces more human centric, because in amongst all this chaos, we can, with intentionality, put things in place that both preserve the longevity of our firms, but also make them more human centric in the way we do things.
So I want you to define the human centric and what that looks like in some practical terms, because I always say, like, your finance team, your accounting team, they know like down to the penny where everything is, but we often have no clarity on the skills of our people, whose capability, what capabilities we have, where our best strengths lie in terms of our workforce. And I think that's a disservice to the organization. So talk about human centricity and how that factors into the work we should be focusing on.
Yeah, and I think the good thing about human centricity is this is what HR people are wired to do anyway. This comes naturally to us. So when it comes to deploying emotional intelligence or empathy, I'm considering the impacts of the employee in the same way if I was a marketer, I'd be considering the impacts of the customer. And I'll give you an example. There have been organizations in this period of time that have had to make tough decisions around resource constraints and around resource reductions. They may be in an industry that's been affected. They're in commercial real estate, or they're in hospitality, or they're in retail, and they've been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. How you decide to handle that activity, as nasty and as unfortunate as it is, really speaks to the culture and the character and the human centricity of the company. If I schedule 500 employees for a 15-minute recorded Zoom call to tell them all they've lost their jobs, that's very different than individual conversations with their leader. Ben, I'm giving you real examples. So when we are developing programs that are in service to HR's administrative burden, or to legal's desire to mitigate risk, then we're not thinking human centricity. We're thinking about risk mitigation, and we're thinking about our own self-interest around efficiencies and work effort. And I understand that there's a lot of pressure on the HR profession. I was in the role for many, many years. And as I told you off the line, Ben, I never had the luxury of being able to make a business case in an organization from HR's perspective on aspirational targets. I always had to offset my investments with hard savings, either in wage reductions or in specific, project or vendor reductions. I wasn't able to say aspirationally, we will achieve this if we can make this investment. Those were always declined when they came from HR in my companies I worked for. I also never had the benefit of working in an organization where my year-over-year operating budget increased. It always went down. So I found that when I negotiated new roles with companies, I was able to negotiate what I needed when I started, and then slowly be whittled away over time as business circumstances changed and as we achieved efficiencies. Inevitably, people would come to us and say, can you be more efficient? Can we delay this training program? Can we defer this engagement initiative so that we can take care of some more short-term business interests? I share all that because I think it's important that people understand that human centricity is a choice, but it doesn't have to be at odds with the business itself. You can create both, but it just requires a bit more thinking around what does this mean in the context of employees. And I go back to the example of the 500 people that were told they were fired in a 15-minute Zoom call that was recorded. How does that make 500 people feel and all the coworkers that work with them? And what does that do for people that who are staying behind in terms of what do they feel for their coworkers? What do they feel for people, how they were treated? And how do they view their employer now when they've seen how they've been able to respond in situations like this? We need to think more broadly about the impacts of our decisions. And when we look at a narrow lens around things like profitability or business performance, we're missing the opportunity to be more inclusive with our decision-making models.
So one of the things, being more inclusive of other pieces, you mentioned technology and process, like those kind of things are a Trojan horse, you said at the very beginning, for the things that we really need to get to. Talk about what you mean by that.
So because we're working within constraints and because I don't see a future where someone's going to come to an HR department, knock on the door and provide them with a giant budgetary increase, especially now where most companies have seen a revenue reduction or have seen revenue deferred, or they're just insulating themselves from risk by increasing capital investments in things like virtual workforces and laptops and all sorts of things. My point is, I don't see a situation where a lot of organizations are diverting more of their revenue into the HR function. So if you take that assumption and you begin with, and you also start with the assumption that most HR departments have been woefully underfunded systemically for many, many years, you get to a situation where you're probably going to be asked to do more with less. And generally speaking, that forces tough decisions. I would want to get ahead of those tough decisions by finding efficiencies within my business that allow me to do a couple things. One is reduce unnecessary spend so that you can redeploy finite resources to functions in your organization that actually add value. I think, Ben, how many people right now are spending 6+ hours a day behind a spreadsheet when that could be done by artificial intelligence or very basic database technology? And I'm not saying as a workforce reduction mechanism, but I'm saying as a redeployment of that same resource into perhaps employment branding or sales or marketing or social media or any other functions in your business that actually drive revenue. You can look at it in that particular context. So a redeployment of resources allows you to solve two problems at once. And getting the efficiencies, that's the impetus to be able to make that change. I also think about things like features and functionality. Technology allows us to be able to operate in different modalities. And we found the constraints that were experienced by a lot of organizations in the days and weeks after COVID-19 kind of popped off, which is they weren't prepared to be able to accordion their workforce and be completely virtual and then come back. And I think going forward, we're going to have to live in this uncertain status of being in various degrees of social distancing, and we're in stage 1, we're in stage 3, we're in a level yellow threat. I think that's going to become a reality over the coming months and years until at least we have a vaccine. So for operational continuity's sake, you also need to be thinking about technology. And the last thing I'll mention around that is I think organizations are sitting on an absolute wealth of underleveraged information, and it looks in the form of data. I think about how much richness is in the data of your organization right now that you could be using to influence reductions on avoidable costs like attrition, or getting better ROI from your learning programs, or finding better ways to leverage business communications without having to travel. There's different ways you can be doing things. And I know, Ben, you're a huge fan of predictive analytics. That's a whole different podcast, but we're sitting on this opportunity. And what I want to encourage people to do is to seize the opportunity to find those efficiencies, because you may have to find ways to self-fund things going forward, in addition to maintaining what you currently have.
Awesome. So one of the things that occurred to me as you were sharing that is, that sounds amazing, right? The average person listening to this probably is like, well, yeah, that's great, right? If I had this unlimited budget, but what about those that don't, which is everyone, right? And you've talked about your background. You've worked for a lot of companies, and I love your story a minute ago where you said, hey, I couldn't ever come to you and say, well, this will make my life easier, so we need to do it. You had to come with some sort of evidence or some sort of data. I don't want to answer the question for you, but I imagine that's probably part of it, is how do you, for those companies that are saying, well, that sounds great, but what do I actually do? Like, how do I make that happen? Any advice for those people that are like, that feel stuck?
Yeah, totally. And this is where you get to, again, you get to lean into the things that make you inherently qualified as an HR person. Because what I do essentially is take all the tools that are available to me to present a really robust business case. So let me tell you how I sold my last digital transformation as a CHRO in an organization. I came into the organization, and at the time there was a legacy payroll solution and a whole bunch of Excel spreadsheets. There was an HR department that was focused purely on operational pieces. So they posted jobs on Monster. They would email resumes to hiring managers. The hiring manager would pick the person, send the request to HR, who would then send an offer letter off to the candidate. There was no validation. There was no screening. It was just simply a manual administrative transaction. There was no HR business partners. There was no compensation. There was no learning and development existed face to face, and trainers flew all over the place that conduct face to face meetings in 40 hours, where they showed PowerPoint presentations, one slide after another, and expected people to retain the knowledge. And then when the training happened, they would go fly somewhere else. But if the first person quit, they'd have to fly back to the first city to train the replacement. So it was just this giant like goat rodeo thing happening, and not malicious, but the company didn't have line of sight to how these types of things could look from a broader HR strategy perspective. And the ownership group came in and said, hey, Matt, we'd like you to come in and add some discipline to what we're doing. And we really like to grow the company at the same time. So we need you to help us solidify the foundation, put in some structure and some regimentation and some discipline. And at the same time, allow us to grow, allow us to be enabled and move into an omni-channel environment where we're going to be able to operate both virtually and in person. Love the challenge, because when in HR, oftentimes you're getting asked to maintain somebody else's strategy. And I've worked in multinational organizations where it comes down from corporate office, but I have to administer it in a local environment. So to be able to conceptualize my own strategy was an opportunity I wanted to take. How I did that essentially was look at first, what's the problem that I'm trying to solve? So to answer your question more directly, the very first question that I ask myself is, what problem am I trying to solve? And if you can't answer that very basic question, then you shouldn't do anything I'm going to say after this, because you need clarity on what the question is and what the problem you're trying to solve is. And that problem should be a problem that is being asked at the most senior levels of the organization. So if what's on your board agenda is operational continuity, because they're concerned about being able to operate 6 months from now in wave 2 of COVID-19, your strategy better have a relation to that. It can't be, how do we increase diversity and inclusion initiatives in the organization, which may very well be important, but contextually and from a timing perspective, just may not be the right timing for it. But a program that speaks to strategic workforce planning, okay, now there's an opportunity to introduce some discipline around workforce planning, some succession, some data science, and you illuminate the need to now introduce analytics into more of our daily practices, as an example. The second thing I'm looking at doing with respect to that is, who are my key stakeholders? Who are the people in the organization that I need support and buy-in from for this to move forward? And it's not just my direct supervisor. In the case of a digital transformation, you need the CFO and you need the CIO at minimum to buy into your initiatives. And in both those cases, what that looked like was a conversation with each to say, hey, here's my vision, and here's how I think it's going to affect you. And I'd really love your opinion on this before I take it to the CEO. What are your thoughts? CFO loves that, because they get a chance, they own the P&L in most organizations, they get a chance to review the digital transformation business case and add their feedback. And when he provided his feedback, he provided some very good, tangible perspective that I wouldn't have been able to come up with on my own. And I was able to strengthen my business case by creating a bit more conservatism in some of the estimates. And the CFO was like, great, this is very conservative. I love this. I love the payback on it. I love the hard costs. I love the offsets. So I had him bought in. Then I went down the hall to the CIO and said, hey, this is my vision. This is what the CFO thinks. I want to accomplish this. What do you think from an IT architecture and technology perspective? Because Ben, I know they're thinking about data security. They're thinking about on-premise versus cloud-based servers. What do you need, CIO, for this to happen? Well, Matt, actually, I'm over subscribed right now. I'm thinking about an ERP implementation the year after you do your transformation. So I'm really sucked in on that. But I need you to ask these 5 questions in every single meeting with a vendor that you tender. I need you to ask about APIs and if they're open or not, because I need the systems to be able to integrate. I don't want to be doing manual integrations later on. I need you to have single sign-on, which, by the way, all these terms, Ben, I had no idea what they were when I started asking these questions, but I had the meetings and I found out. Yeah, I found out what the things were. And I think the single sign-on, which for IT, they despise password resets just as much as we despise, can I please get my latest vacation report from payroll? Like, it's the same manual transactional piece. So a single sign-on, it gives employees the functionality to log on once into their solution and go into any one of the HR technologies. Matt, I want to make sure we have cloud-based servers and not on-premise. My IT team is not resourced to manage on-premise servers. We're not resourced to manage another vendor. I need you guys to handle a SaaS-based solution problem. I also need to make sure that before you make any final decisions, that our solutions architect has a chance to look at it, just do one final scrub to make sure there's nothing that's not going to work within our existing ecosystem. Is that cool? I said, absolutely. And we did that with every single one of the 70 plus vendors we met with, brought back a short list, and we went to the board and said, hey, this is our business case for transformation. We built it with the CFO and the finances. I built the tech plan with the CIO, and this is what we think we should do. What do you guys think? The board instantly looked at the CFO and said, do you actually agree? And he said, yes. Looked at the CIO and said, do you actually agree? He said, yes. And they said it was approved. And it took about 14 minutes because we had the alignment up front of the people that were going to be affected by it. We had the clear decision and the clear problem we were trying to solve. In this case, we were trying to digitally transform the company and grow it 50% at the same time. And this was a strategy to achieve that. And then from there, it was, here are all the resources that I need to accomplish that, which were all signed off when I had the buy-in from the two other executives. The level of planning that I went into that 14 minutes, Ben, was weeks of work and data and research and employee conversations and stakeholder meetings and meetings before the meetings to be able to rehearse for that 14 minutes to get the yes that ultimately meant 3 years of capital funding.
I don't want to put too many of our brothers and sisters in the HR space, like put them on the on the hot seat, but I would imagine a lot of them, because I know I've made this mistake before myself, would say, okay, I've got to prepare, and that meeting is where I've got to hit this. And you just said, like, it was decided before the meeting ever happened. That was basically a formality. Everybody else was bought in. It was ready to go. They just had to give it the thumbs up. But if you think, okay, we're going to make this thing happen, I'm going to do all my prep work on my own. I'm going to try to show up here in my own siloed sort of viewpoint of the world and make this happen. They maybe would have said yes, but it would have taken a lot longer than that. It would have been very hard, and you would have had a hard time during that conversation being able to prove you had done the due diligence. So I love that you laid that groundwork, had the foundation, had the buy-in from the earliest stages, and had their support. That's an incredible story. I love that.
Well, and it speaks to human nature. So I've sat in enough boardrooms to know that if you surprise executives in a room and ask them for their opinion, the answer is 90% going to be negative.
Yes.
Because they want time to be able to assess it. And they realize that when they put thumbs up and thumbs down to something, it's their neck on the line. So just from a courtesy perspective, if nothing else, I want to give them the courtesy and the respect of saying, hey, I'm about to undertake a project that's going to have a direct impact on your ability to do your job and how your team is going to do their job. So I need you to understand why I'm doing this. I need you to understand, and I need your support in helping me do this. And I need you to know that if during this process, things don't go as planned, one, we have some mitigation strategies. So one thing I didn't mention, Ben, is we built a whole matrix of risks that we thought might happen. And we built offset plans against them, just one line sentences in an Excel spreadsheet to say, if this happens, if the project manager leaves at 6 months, how do we shift things over? So we had a plan in place to be able to, when the board say, well, what happens now when this happens? Because I had a board member who was particularly enjoyed asking, those doomsday scenario questions. So we prepped for those and we had answers, and that gave that person confidence that we had thought that through, and gave the CFO in this case confidence that we had thought that through. And CFOs aren't unlike CHROs in that they're often asked to manage risk. So we helped them, equip them to feel like they were able to contribute. And that is how you build buy-in. You don't build buy-in by doing the great reveal. That doesn't work, especially with things that are, and here's another thing. I mean, I'll speak a bit more plainly. That's not really wise. It's not really wise to sign up for a project where you own all the accountability yourself for a lot of things that you don't have any control over. You need a whole bunch of people to help you in this journey at one point or another. This is not about you. You are facilitating the outcome for the business. So you need to treat it like that and remove the ego from, I'm going to show everybody how great I am, and focus more on, how do I work with other people to be successful?
I'm going to repeat what you just said, because that's a quotable quote. You are facilitating the outcome on behalf of the business. Right? This is the big HR project. This is the business's project, and I happen to be running this. I'm accountable for it. I'm the one that's reporting on everything else, but I'm running this on their behalf. And when you see it that way, I think that changes your perspective a little bit from, well, this is mine, right? It may very well be yours, but in the big picture, see it as, this is the business's thing, and how can I help make sure it's successful? And all the stakeholders that care at that level are also bought in, supportive, and they're kept aware as we're going forward. That's so many good lessons out of that story. I want to be respectful of your time, Matt. You're so generous with your time, and I really appreciate that. You're always willing to have a conversation, and I don't want to open that to everybody, but if someone's ever wants to pick your brain about doing these kinds of things, like this is what you're good at. This is where I see your expertise. You really help senior HR leaders understand these things. You're just a phenomenal at helping to cast that vision. If someone wants to connect with you, just learn more about what you're up to, what other sort of projects you got going on, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I mean, I would just say it's anchored in experience. So
Yes.
one thing I appreciate about our conversations, Ben, is that our feedback is always anchored in real life stories. And I think at a time when everybody wants to be helpful, it's hard to separate those who are trying to be helpful and sharing other people's information from those who've had the experiences. And right now, I want to talk to people who've had experiences because we are very much in a short-term type focus where there's very real consequences for our decisions. As you know, I spend way too much time on LinkedIn. So folks can find me there, Matt Burns HR at LinkedIn. If you're interested in seeing what I do professionally, you can also find me at bentohr.com.
I was going to say one last quote because you'll appreciate this, and you keep giving me so many good ideas. I've been making notes over here as you're sharing. A person with experience is never at the mercy of a person with opinion. That's one of my favorite quotes, and I love that one. So thank you, Matt. So glad to have you here. I know everybody else probably enjoyed it as much as I did. I took a lot of notes, and again, you can reach him there. I'll make sure and get the link to his LinkedIn page and Bento HR in the show notes. You can check him out there. Thank you again, and glad to have you, brother.
Thanks, Ben. Be well.
Matt started us off with a bang. Lots of insights on using data, building a business case, really pushing things forward. And I love that as an addition to the other content this week because we talked about onboarding, we talked about influence, we talked about leadership, we talked about all these different things that we need to be doing as HR leaders. And he gives us some ideas on how to really sell that, how to build that business case and push it through internally. And I love that. Next up, we have Chevy Cook. He's an incredible person. I had a chance to meet him at an event last year, and he got a standing ovation from the audience, like tears coming down their faces. Just a phenomenal gentleman, and I'm so thankful for him, not just for his military service, but for the work he's doing to make the world a better place. Now, let's hear some special operations lessons from him, his experience in that community.
Hey, thanks, Ben, for having me this morning, and thanks for everybody who's on the call or on the video with me this morning. I like to start these with a story, so I hope everybody's found with a story this morning. So with that being said, let's get into it. As you maneuver your team, the sudden crack of a bullet whipping past and puffs of dirt let you know that the enemy's rounds are landing danger close, upping your adrenaline and your fear. As you're tired, crossing the finish line of a long marathon, an improvised bomb goes off. Utter chaos ensues, and you're trying to help a couple able-bodied people to safety, even though you don't know whether there's another bomb around or not. You can't see or breathe as smoke fills the room, and a couple people look to you after a plane has crashed into your building to figure out which stairwell to go down. A global pandemic cripples your workforce as new schedules and sickness make business slow down to a halt. In all these events, from health catastrophe to combat, the ability to lead through an emergency, during an emergency, has to happen. You have to have those skills before the emergency ever arrives. Or as a person, a leader in the Hurricane Katrina event once said, you can't become in 30 minutes what you haven't been for 30 years. I like to tweak that a little bit, actually. Your organization can't become in 30 minutes what it hasn't recruited, reinvented, and retained for the last 30 years. My name is Chevy Cook. I also go by Chevy. I am an active duty Army officer, have been for about 17 years now, with about a dozen of those in the special operations community. I will glean some lessons learned for you to recruit, reinvent, and retain your people today through that special operations community lens. but I will also be looking through the lens of my time as an instructor at the United States Military Academy. I will also try to glean some lessons I've learned as a doctoral student at Tufts right now. And I also get the chance to wear another hat, which is the executive director of a Military Mentors, which is a nonprofit. So I also lead in the volunteer space, and I talk this leader development stuff to a wide swath of people. So with that being said, let's figure out how you can recruit, reinvent, and retain elite folks of your own. Now, you may have a lot of different ideas of what special operations or soft special operations forces look like. You might picture a Navy SEAL creeping up out of the water with breathing apparatus on in some hot jungle. You may picture a gentleman with a lot of gear on, night vision goggles, and maybe a silenced weapon kicking open a door. You may be more modern, so you picture some burly guy, sunburnt skin in some godforsaken hot place. Beard on his face so thick that you can't even see his lips. Oakley's dirty baseball cap on backwards. No semblance of a uniform, but some type of body armor and a weapon. Well, I want to start this conversation by looking at this photo that I'm sharing here, or a series of photos, so you can see the diversity, inclusion, and equitability of the soft community I get to be a part of. At the surface level, you see some interesting things as you look across. You see male, female, tall, short, wide, skinny, black, white, Hispanic. You see berets, you see civilian clothes, you see parachutes, you see guns, brains, brawn. You see pilots, shooters, intel specialists, linguists, influencers, as much as you also see supporters for all of those troops. But at a deeper surface level, I want you to understand that in all of these pictures, you may see a bunch of individual talent, but it's crafted into well-gelled teams consisting of highly specialized, culturally astute warrior diplomats from the Army, from the Navy, from the Marines, from the Air Force. To drill in specifically, I don't want to have a Where's Waldo moment, but you might see me in that photo, in one of those photos as well. But to the bottom center, you have Captain Sidney Jocks. The Army has had about 24 women graduate from Ranger School, one of our elite leadership schools, in the past couple of years since they removed the combat exclusionary law from women. She's one of them, but she also made headlines about this time last year when she donned that tan beret and was the first woman to be assigned with a Ranger tab to 75th Ranger Regiment, which is the Special Operations Forces shock troops, infantry shock troops. They also look like the gentleman to the top center, who is Master Chief Petty Officer Edward Byers, a Navy SEAL who has a distinguished medal around his neck. It's blue. It's the Medal of Honor. He also has a Purple Heart on his chest. So the soft community can look like a broad swath of people. So how do we get these type of people? Obviously, it's through recruiting, right? These people walk into recruiting stations, or a recruiter walks up to them and asks them if they want to be a part of the service. But how do you recruit those type of people as well? Let me give you some tips. You probably think that we're recruiting this. You probably think we're looking for an apex predator like a cheetah, something that already has the DNA born and bred into it to be at the top of the food chain. Let's look at the cheetah for a second. An axe for a head to help it cut through the wind. Long, strong limbs to help push and pull it down the savannah. A lung capacity greater than anybody on this video call that helps turn over the oxygen needed to pump the blood for this thing to run 60 plus miles an hour as the fastest land mammal. A tail just as long as one of those limbs, if you actually look, to help it shift and turn as it's chasing the gazelle or the antelope on the plain, and not just turn over and tumble when it's going 50 miles an hour. It has to make that sharp left or right. But you don't want a cheetah. Neither do we, so we don't recruit cheetahs, right? This thing is wild and untamed. And that's not what you need in your organization. That's not what you want to recruit for. And it's not what we recruit for either. Rather, you probably want a greyhound because that's what we look for. I hope somebody out there on the call has a greyhound as a pet so they can relate to this moment. But if you don't have a greyhound as a pet, I will tell you right now that they just want to run. They don't necessarily like to race. They need to be put in context. They need to be trained to take care, to build up those attributes that they naturally have so they can be a racer. Otherwise, they just want to be man's best friend. And you take them out on a walk, and when you throw that tennis ball or that frisbee or that stick, they might get it really fast and bring it back to you. But other than that, they're just a regular dog that is quick. If you look at the characteristics of his feline counterpart, you'll see a lot of those same physical characteristics in this canine. However, it needs to be trained to become what we know it to be on the track. So remember that. We're looking for unfinished products. This thing is trained and domesticated. We're looking for unfinished products like the greyhound, and we're not looking for the cheetah. But how do we do that? What characteristics are we actually looking for in people? Let's not talk about animals anymore. All right, 2 quick things when you recruit, if you want to recruit like the soft community. The first thing you're looking for is suitability. Is this person right for this environment, for this job? This is about soft fit. For us, it's can you be on a team? Can you be independent? Can you be somewhere without a whole lot of leadership bearing down on you? Can you operate independently or amongst a small team? This is about the training and experience that they bring to the community. For you, that may look like, to translate a little bit, that might look like an MBA or some certifications, previous job experiences they may have. Soft fit might look like, hey, if you look at me, my skin tone, my hair, my build, and the name Chaveso, you might say, hey, this guy probably fits well in South America or the Caribbean. But also with my look, you probably say I can fit in Africa and the Middle East as well. So we're looking for suitability. Do you fit? But we're also looking for, are you trainable? Can we give you more gears for your gearbox, to allude to the photo a little bit? So let's think about it this way. When you come to my community, you have to do some type of assessment and selection to transition from whatever you were before. And one of the things that you have to take as a part of that training set is something called the Defense Language Aptitude Battery, or the DLAB for short. And it is entrance criteria. It is a test of what language ability you have to learn language. Notice what I said, learn language. I didn't say it was a test of what French or Spanish or whatever language you already know. We're more concerned with what language capacity you have to learn something new, something else. So I ask you today, as you're looking for a person's trainability as you're recruiting them, are you only looking on their resume to see that they went to a top-notch school, or that they have a bachelor's as opposed to an associate's, or that they have an MBA or an MPP or something already? Or are you asking future questions during your recruiting process? Are you seeing if they have a GMAT, a GRE, an LSAT, some previous certification, maybe just a community college degree because you want them to go and get more specified training than that bachelor's that everybody, or that master's that everybody seems to want? Where's your future focus? Remember, we're not looking for apex predators. We're not looking for cheetahs. We're looking for unfinished products. We're looking for greyhounds. So take that into account. Think about your future as you're recruiting. Suitability and trainability, they go together. If suitability is about fit, then trainability is about fitness, something we need to build. So your takeaway here from the recruitment piece is that you need both fit and fitness. Taking it back to me going to South America, doesn't happen because Chavezo no hablo Espanol or Portuguese, and I probably actually butchered that pretty well. I've not been trained in Spanish, nor have I been trained in counter drug operations and what the SALT community tends to do in the South. But what I have done is I've been trained in Arabic, and I have these skills in counter-violent extremism and counterterrorism. So I have spent time on the African continent, and I have spent time in the Middle East, all the way from Jordan across and up above Afghanistan and Tajikistan. So that's where I had both fit and fitness, and I was placed in the right spot. And that's one of the recruiting tips that I would give you if you want to be like soft. So now that we have the right people, we need to do something to them. We need to give them those skill sets. They're trainable, so let's train them. We're going to reinvent them. The SALT community does a good job of that. We want to give you some of those tips, tricks of the trade as well. So it's like a hammer and an anvil and a piece of hot metal, right? We're creating the opportunity to shape, mold somebody to be something new, maybe sharp. Maybe this is a sword that we're forging. So we're trying to create what I would call developmental experiences or crucible experiences, which are where leaders are forged. This is a transformative experience through which a person gets a whole new insight or altered sense of reality going forward. These experiences should be iterative and nested and not one-time events. So it's just like this hammer anvil and the piece of metal, right? You take it out, it's hot, you bang on it, shape it, but it's just not perfect. So you gotta cool it off, inspect it, put it back in, cool, shape, forge, reheat, repeat, right? But we're not forging metal, we're making people better as we're reinventing them. So what does that process actually look like? So the Center for Creative Leadership down in North Carolina has defined a developmental experience as having 3 key components that you see on the screen: assessment, challenge, and support. What does that look like in my community? So if they wanted to make me a better shooter, at one point they did, and they wanted to assess my ability to fire a weapon. So that simply means me going out to the range, shooting at a static target, not doing anything really dynamic, just trying to see how well I can be accurate and have precision with my fire. The challenge specifically tailored to me and my team was, I went to a school called Griffin Group, and at this school, we had the opportunity to be in the back of a vehicle, trailering another vehicle to make it seem like we're in hot pursuit. I'm shooting out of the back window into the windshield of the other vehicle that has 2 dummies in the passenger and driver seat, target on chest, target on face and chest. And if you've never thrown a rock or seen a front windshield break, it doesn't just smash out, it spider webs and it's really thick. So as you shoot rounds through the windshield, it deflects in kind of weird ways. And then the vehicle is moving and turning and bumping over things to replicate what I might have seen in combat. So that is specifically tailored to make me better shooter in that situation. And after a couple iterations, I figured out, all of us did, figure out how to hit the target. But what we didn't do was we didn't pull out 50 cal Barrett sniper rifles and try to shoot targets a mile away, because our team wasn't gonna do any sniper operations overseas. So this challenge was specifically tailored to me and my team. The support piece, though, is what is usually lacking. The Center for Creative Leadership will tell you that we kind of fall off on the support piece. We're good at assessing where somebody is, putting a challenge in their way, and then walking off to make sure we get our work done. The support piece is important, though. Think about that same training scenario for me at Griffin Group. I needed the training time. I needed those cars. I needed the instructors to show me what to do. I needed the bullets. I needed the money to even do the training. I needed water and food for the day. If I didn't have bullets, that's a really boring, bumpy ride when I'm just making some firing sounds and not actually doing the do. And I needed that challenge in America under controlled conditions before I ever needed to experience that overseas. So the support piece is critically important, and it's incumbent upon leaders to craft these deliberate and continuous developmental experiences so you can assess, challenge, and support both the persons in your organization, but also make broader organizational assessments of where you are, where you need to be. That's how you reinvent folks. But as you do this reinvention process, I want you to also think about something that I learned during my time here studying human development as a PhD student. Something called relational developmental systems. RDS is a meta theory that says the individual cannot be stricken from the context, and vice versa, the context can be stricken from the individual. Hopefully in this video, you can see the sniper, well, this picture, you can see the sniper slightly off to the right by identifying his face. You can see some of his clothes. Through his clothing, he's very well camouflaged for that environment. The individual cannot be stricken from the environment, the context. So what that looks like is, even if you tailor make everything to the individual, you have the right training, you've done all your research, this is specifically for that person. But you bring them back to an environment, your organization hasn't changed to be a learning environment, to be accepting of what that person has learned. If you're just gonna shove them back in a cubicle and they're gonna go back to doing what they were doing and the stuff that they learned never gets put into practice, you're not gonna get your return on investment because of this idea from RDS meta theory. But the vice versa is the same. You can have a robust learning environment and an organizational culture that's right to take advantage of new learning, new opportunity, new experiences. But if everyone just goes through the same pipeline of training, does the same things at all times, and it's not individually tailored to that person or that team, you're not going to get your return on investment. Go back to my shooting scenario. Again, if everyone just got Griffin Group and no one got sniper training, then we'd have no one who could shoot long distance. So think about that tailoring and think about both the individual and the organizational context that you're trying to reinvent people through. All right, so you've recruited the right people. You've reinvented them. And what do they want to do? They want more pay. So they're going to go somewhere else, hightail it out of there. So how do you keep them, right? You've done all this investment. You've changed your organization. You changed the individuals. How do you keep them in your organization? Well, the soft community doesn't keep every single person, but we do a decent job. And how do we do it? Well, I'm here to share a couple tips. All right, we're making stars, right? That's what we're making, that's what you want to make. But you got to see, just like this picture, you got to help them see that they're just one star of many. They're part of a constellation. How do you get those around you and your teams, as you've recruited them and reinvented them, to believe in something bigger than themselves? That's what my soft community does, has done for me, has done for many before me, will continue to do. Believe in a cause, a mission, or even a nation broader than yourself. How are you helping them see themselves within the other stars, within the constellation? If you're a Special Forces Green Beret, a part of your motto would say, I will do all that my nation requires of me. If you're a SEAL, part of their motto says, in times of war or uncertainty, there is a special breed of warrior ready to answer our nation's call. A common man with an uncommon desire to succeed. In both of those models, you see a bigger, broader, stretching picture where they're seeing themselves as a part of something bigger. This is about something called vertical loyalty. Now, we think of vertical loyalty initially, intuitively, you might think, oh, to a chain of command, to my boss. That is not the case. That is not what I'm discussing. What I'm actually talking about here is to institutional principles, vertical loyalty to something beyond us, right? The Army, I've been in the Army, the Army will go rolling along as a simple model. The Army has been around for well over 200 years. I need to be attached to those, I need to be vertically loyal to those institutional principles. And I hope in order to retain individuals, you would have organizational values that they could cling to. and not just the people, because people change out, bosses change. But there's also this other piece, right? The horizontal piece of that loyalty to each other, to your peers, whether they be in a cubicle or whether you're going out doing something else. Horizontal loyalty is also important. So this is a great famous picture of a bunch of SEALs from Vietnam. And if you talk to anybody who's done anything valorous, or they've done something to save somebody's life, or they've been through a hectic situation, they'll probably tell you something along the lines of, I do this for the person to my left or right. I was just doing my job. I didn't want to let my buddy down. I was never going to leave a fallen comrade. So how do you build that loyalty? How do you build that camaraderie to make them want to stay, not just for your institutional principles, but for the people around them that you've also recruited and reinvented? That's how you're going to retain them. And let me tell you something, flat brass tacks. You don't need to go to a firefight to build that camaraderie, okay? You don't have to go through a crisis, even though we're all going through it right now, to build that type of teamwork and that team concept. When I come to my community, some of the training that we go through, the assessment and selection process, and when we go off to do little interesting things to just bring us closer, to get us to know each other, get us outside of the office, are the things that build those ties that bind. So I'm asking you today, how are you getting people away from the keyboard? How are you getting them away from the cubicle? How are you getting them away from the office so they can connect? When we get back to normal work conditions, what are you going to do to build team work back, since we've been working from home for so long? Remember, horizontal and vertical loyalty need to be built. And my last point here is, I've been showing you pictures of a lot of different people. I just went back to the Vietnam era. I want to show you some current pictures of myself, actually. You'll find me in these pictures in Iraq, in Niger, about to jump out of a plane door in Afghanistan. You'll see me at West Point, putting a new lieutenant in the Army. You might see me in a picture in Petra. You see me in a vast expanse of seeing something bigger and broader than myself in one photo, and right there in the center, you actually see my announcement photo from a couple years ago, where I was saying, hey, the Army's gonna give me some time to actually go study at Tufts. And at the same time, oh, by the way, we're having a surprise baby. Did one announcement together. This picture is about seeing something bigger, broader, and having unique experiences. So what's your version of letting them see the world? If you talk to anybody in the military, a lot of times they talk about how they got a chance to see different things and see the world, right? And then they can be, like I've shown in some of these photos, they can be a foreign country where things are dangerous, or they can just be opportunities, right? My opportunity to teach, my opportunity to jump out of planes, my opportunity to get this education that I'm getting right now is a unique experience where I got to see something different. The RSOF promise, the Army Special Operations Force promise from the United States Army Special Operations Command, I protect the nation without fear, without failure, and without equal. The only way I can understand it in a bigger, broader context is if I see something different than just what I'm used to day, crunching out numbers. So how do you help your people see the world? All right, to wrap up really quick, I'll go back over these 3 principles. All right, the first one about recruiting. Remember, you're looking for greyhounds, not cheetahs. You're looking for suitability and trainability, right? And ultimately, you want both fit and fitness. That second takeaway there for reinventing someone is creating these developmental experiences, assess, challenge, and support, right? You want to make hammer and anvil type of situations to really forge new types of folks. And lastly, like I just went over, you're looking at horizontal and vertical loyalty, but you also want to give them the world. You want them to have a greater and bigger context, but also that connection, that connectivity. Fitness, hammer and anvil, content, context, and connection. With that being said, I'll pause for any questions if anybody wants to ask me anything today as you watch this video. And my contact information is there, so we can connect on a potentially deeper, broader basis. And you can find me. I'm the only Chaveso cook on the planet. So if you look me up on LinkedIn, even if I might not have a mustache in the picture, that's me. I thank you for your time today, and I hope you can go out there and recruit, reinvent, and retain your elite team members. Thank you.
Chevy, my friend, I'm so thankful that you took some time with us. I mentioned in the comments a minute ago, one of the things that you also do, in addition to everything else, you didn't give yourself credit for it, but I definitely will. You head up an organization called Military Mentors, and that's militarymentors.org. If you want to check them out, he's doing good things to support that community. And I just thank you for everything you're doing, my friend. I appreciate you sharing with us today. Next up, we have Anthony. Anthony's going to talk to us about the intersection of inclusion and being your authentic self. There's no other you on this planet. It is said there's no other Chaveso cook on the planet. There's no other you on this planet. And Anthony's going to talk to us about why it's important to be your authentic self. And I'm excited to take some notes. So Anthony, welcome, sir.
Thanks, Ben, for having me. I really appreciate it. This is a great tool and a great resource to have. So again, Ben, thank you for having me. I've seen the lineup and it looks great. So the purpose of my topic really is, or the title of it is the importance of inclusion and being your true authentic self. And I'm Anthony Paradiso. I'm the owner and founder of All Things App. So one of the things that, obviously this is not, you're seeing me through the camera, we're not obviously live, but one of the things I always point out during my presentations is that this is a judgment-free zone. This is a very, discussing diversity, inclusion, equity is a very tough conversation, and that we kind of just started the last few years. So I really try to emphasize that this is a judgment-free zone. Normally, during this, I would have probably people will be commenting live here, but in the situation, we're not going to have that. But in any event, my information to contact me will be at the end of the slide or the last slide. So you can always reach me that way or social media. So about me, I'm a husband. This is a picture of my husband and I. We travel a lot, or we did until everything happened. So this is where I think we're in Amsterdam. This is my nephew and niece. My parents. I work full-time for Industrial UI Services, and I also consult through my All Things App company. I'm also SHRM certified. I'm a part of the LGBTQ community. This is my dog, Lizzie. I'm part of the Garden State Council as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the state of Jersey. You can't really see it there because my picture's over there, but I was in the most inclusive list last year and this year. And then other things too. I'm part of the North Jersey Rockland SHRM chapter as the VP of D&I. I received my SHRM Foundation Veterans Work Certificate, and I'm also have the Inclusive Workplace Culture Specialty through SHRM. A little bit more. So I'm a husband, raised in a working class family, a proud uncle, first generation college graduate. I'm a gay cisgender male. Member of Toastmasters, blogger, influencer. I do have a speech impediment, as you probably noticed, so I may have a little stutter here and there. So if you hear it, just and I go through these too because we all have vulnerability. So I want to make sure that we tell our story, we tell everything. So again, that's how we share, and that's how we get closer. I love to travel, so I'm looking forward when we can travel again. But obviously, right now, staying home and staying safe. And I'm a certified HR professional with a strong passion for diversity and inclusion. So going right into it, I'm sure most of you, maybe some of you have not, but this is a famous quote: diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. This is by Verna Myers. She's a D&I expert. She created this quote some years ago, and I always find it to be, it's kind of really just jumps at you and really it kind of just gives you what, or at least kind of gives you a target as to what D&I is. So I always start off with that. So normally, if this is live, I would ask, what is diversity to you? Like, what kind of words come out to you? So while, so as I'm saying this to you, think to yourself, or jot down notes of what diversity is to you. Just where you can do one word, a couple of words. While you're doing that, the definition that I found very useful is diversity is any dimension that can be used to differentiate groups and people from one another. It's about empowering people by respecting and appreciating what makes them different in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, etc. The list goes beyond what's on here. Diversity allows for explanation of these differences in a safe, positive, and nurturing environment. It means understanding one another by surpassing simple tolerance to ensure people truly value their differences. So, so as far as numbers, it's been known diversity definitely drives better business performance. Businesses with a healthy balance of men and women are 21% more likely to outperform their competitors. And the list goes on. 33% more are likely to outperform their competitors with a good mix of ethnic backgrounds. 87% on teams that are gender, age, and ethnically diverse make better decisions. Diverse workplace and generate 19% more revenue than less diverse work environments, and so forth and so on. And these slides will also be in PDF format. So if I'm not going to go through every single thing, but it will be there for you. Now, inclusion, again, think of what inclusion is to you. Jot down some words. Again, what jumps at you? This is a video that I want to play. Actually, I have to enable it. I'm sorry. Go back here. There's always problems. Just 1 second. Sorry about that. And if I can't play, I think it works. Here we go.
There are people out there that would consider me, quote unquote, I hate this word, but a terrorist. As an Indigenous person, you were known as somebody who potentially could be a drunk, have substance abuse issues.
Being Indian, they have expected me to know a lot about computers.
It's sometimes a really unique experience navigating the world as a person with a disability who looks to be completely able-bodied. He made a comment about, well, don't worry about this that's going on because you won't be here too much longer. You'll be off having your next baby soon. Most women are, told they need to behave a certain way.
People really think that my generation is lazy.
Just another blonde waitress.
Hey, do you rap?
The only Black girl. I didn't belong.
I guess kind of growing up, people made these assumptions about what I was supposed to be, but it was really eye-opening for me to realize that I had been making those same assumptions myself.
We all like to think that we're inclusive, but sometimes we don't actually step back and think, wait a second, did I hear everybody in the room? I mean, don't judge is the message, but it's also hard not to. I always thought that every gay man was flamboyant and rude.
The older generation is set in their ways. Initially, I thought there was something weird about a girl who would want to be a camera operator because of the word cameraman, and we still have to work past these things and stuff.
I went into the school on my first day, and there's these little girls, and they're wearing hijabs, and I was really intimidated by that. Have your initial judgments, but also be willing to learn. My definition of inclusion is a world and a society in which constructed barriers have been torn down.
Inclusion for me is setting up an environment where everybody is comfortable.
Open to accept other people's opinions.
All individuals, regardless of their diversity, feel welcomed, feel respected.
It means that they don't have to try to be what others expect them to be.
Change is possible, but it takes the right person to make a change happen.
I had a shop floor supervisor who stood up for me and sent out a company-wide email saying that Robin has every legal right to use the women's change rooms. It's funny because you do find allies in some of the strangest places.
One thing we can do to support inclusion is to talk about it.
You have to demonstrate that you're committed to this.
Get to know people around you. Do something different. Learn something different. Learn about a culture.
Different races, different religions, different belief systems, and see what there's good in all those things.
Be an active listener. That's one of the things I practice with other immigrants as well.
Open up your mind and take your time and get to know someone instead of putting them in this box. Is showing that interest. It's going to surprise you.
Ask me a stupid question. I don't care if it's a stupid question, just ask me.
I'm an open book and willing to answer them.
I don't see it as a negative thing. I see it as a teachable moment. Just ask me how to pronounce my name.
It's simple. You decide that other people's feelings and experiences matter.
We need to have more uncomfortable conversations so that we can drive more inclusion. And oftentimes it's not easy.
We're not there, but certainly we're on the right track.
And it's important, otherwise change will never happen.
My name is Shomodip Ganguly, but people call me Sam.
I am Layla Karem.
Mutsa Matanga.
Ms. Genevieve Leblanc.
Ashley Pasila.
Patrick Duff, Neil McLaughlin.
Alina Gotchling.
Rod Bolger.
Jessica Shue.
Kazim Marcano. I'm a chef and I forge metals.
A proud mother.
Forklift operator and a truck driver.
I envision a day when we can just be so accepting of each other, where we can make space for others.
So a very powerful video. I found this video about a year ago, and I do love it because really to speak up for inclusion, we need to speak about inclusion. Having these tough conversations is essential, and this is where I tie towards the end, telling our stories and being our true authentic self is how we create and speak about inclusion, because we all have stories. So inclusion is an organizational effort and practice in which different groups or individuals having different backgrounds are culturally and socially accepted and welcomed and equally treated. These differences can be self-evident, such as national origin, race and ethnicity, age, gender, marital status, etc., educational background, training, sector experience. And another thing that's been talked about too is introverts and extroverts. That's been a wide discussion in the discussion around inclusion. Inclusion is a sense of belonging. It creates engagement, and again, I'll go over this a little more. But this is a few more things that are about inclusion. This is something I found too that I really like to I'm a visual person, so when I see this, it kind of just shows me what's going on. To the left part of the picture, you see scattered. You see scattered puzzle. It's a puzzle piece that's scattered, and then to the right of it, with the inclusion part, you see it more together. It's kind of complete. So what does inclusion mean? So when you refer to inclusion, to what degree to which diverse individuals are able to do? So they use their voice, participate in the decision-making processes within a group, the amount of power they have within that group. People of all backgrounds feel like they actually belong. So diversity inclusion drive a lot of things. These are some things that came to mind right away, but rates of innovation, engagement, results, business value, motivation, retention, performance, opportunity, civility, sense of belonging, and the list goes on. Research by Deloitte finds organizations with inclusive environments or cultures are 6 times as likely to be innovative and agile, 8 times as likely to achieve better business results, and twice as likely to meet or exceed financial targets. So it's not just the diversity part, you need the inclusion part with it, and both combined really can expand an organization's financial gains. And besides the financial part of it too, it's just the right thing to do. I wrote this a while ago, and inclusion is essential for diversity programs and initiatives to succeed. Diversity is extremely important, but diversity cannot sustain itself without inclusion. This is something I would say the last year we were beginning to realize. Diversity has always been a topic of discussion. It's really grew since the 2016 election. And then from there, we've learned that diversity is not only important, but so is inclusion. Without inclusion, though if you hire diverse candidates, if they don't feel included, they're going to more than likely leave the organization, which then creates a low retention rate. So it's very important to have an inclusive environment. More inclusion numbers, and I'm just moving around my screen just so you can kind of see here. So teams with inclusive leaders are 17% more likely to report that they are high performing, 20% more likely to say that they make high quality decisions, 29% more likely to report behaving collaboratively, 10% improvement in perceptions of inclusion that increases work attendance by almost 1 day a year per employee, reducing the cost of absenteeism. So it's not just even the financial part of it; it's also you're seeing performance, decision making, engaging in collaboration with your colleagues, and then also being at work, attendance. And to even continue with the financial success, organizations with inclusive cultures are 2 times as likely to meet or exceed financial targets, 3 times as likely to be high performing, 6 times more likely to be more innovative and agile, and 8 times more likely to achieve better business outcomes. Now, COVID-19. This is something I added in, obviously, because we are in a situation where COVID-19, we're in a pandemic situation. So now kind of inclusion, diversity, it changes a lot. A lot of organizations, unfortunately, they had D&I initiatives, and right now, because of everything going on, it's been sidetracked. I don't agree with that. I think D&I needs to be in the forefront. I have had my own webinars that I've hosted to keep the conversation going. But going forward with that, one of the things that we also have seen through this pandemic and COVID-19 is the mental health. Mental health has always been discussed, but it's really been discussed in great lengths. And I found this very simple. I don't take credit for this by any means. I found this on Instagram, and I use it practically every day with my team, either through my day job, my own consulting business, through volunteer work. I always kind of start off with this. It's a very simple thing, with the different colors and the hearts and how you are. So I really recommend you just do mental health check. You can search for it, and it's just an easy way for us to discuss how we're doing. When we are in these Zoom meetings and these virtual meetings, it's not just about going right to discussion about business. It's also about how we're doing. So kind of going forward with that too, when you're having a meeting, don't just go right into the meeting and just go right into the daily tasks of the day. Go and actually have a discussion. The leader of the meeting should pause, talk before the meeting starts, or even when the meeting starts. Share some of your personal selves. All of these things create innovation and create more, create an atmosphere of being comfortable to discuss further ideas that all started because we had a simple conversation about what our kids are doing, or a discussion about dogs or pets, so whatever the case may be. Just pause and talk. Don't just get right into business. Back to the mental health part again. The stats show clearly that mental health has risen since COVID-19. And also, one of the things that's very important is, for companies to realize is that exactly what this says. If you want to attract and retain a workforce, right now you're sending a message to your employees what your true colors are. So it's really important to really do the right thing, do what's best for your employees, and whatnot. Pathways to an inclusive environment. This is what I found a way of how we can get there is to create a clear vision and mission, adjust to the audience, listen and listen carefully. It's really important there. Don't just talk, but listen. Creating clear set of expectations of behavior that promotes inclusion. Having an environment where it is safe to have vulnerabilities. That's also another important thing. Sharing your vulnerabilities, like I did in the very beginning, sharing my stuttering, my stutter problem that I may have. It's shared. Be proud of your vulnerabilities, because they make you who you are. Include people with different points of view. A greater emphasis with unconscious bias training. Artificial intelligence working together to minimize biases. I know Ben has a book on AI. This is going to be a big thing, artificial intelligence. So work together to minimize our biases. Developing shared form of communications. Be transparent. How you walk the walk. There's much more to this, but being that I don't have much time, one of the things you can do, and you don't have to be a CEO, but one of the sites that I recommend going to is ceoaction.com. They have an unconscious bias training. They actually have a bus that goes around the United States for unconscious bias training, but they also have other really great tools that I recommend going to. They have great videos. They also have at the I Act on Pledge. So you as an individual can pledge to have an inclusive environment, and you also can have your CEO of your business do it as well, which I highly recommend. I did it for my company, All Things App. I really recommend doing it. It's a great source of information. So again, it's all the information's right there. It's ceoaction.com. And how do we, I believe really storytelling and being your authentic self ties in with the diversity inclusion part of things. Being who you are is really important. So how do we do that? Tell your story. Tell your story. It's useful. It's inspiring. It's important. Even though you may think it's not, it really, really is. So tell yours. Storytelling is a way to create more understanding around the concept of inclusion. Everybody has a diversity inclusion story, even those you least expect. There's an illustration I've seen, I don't know, a few years ago. We have a boardroom with all middle-aged white guys, white men who are in a boardroom, and they're bald, and they each have above their head a squibbly short story about them, and you see that all of them have a story. So we really do. We all have a story. We have to make sure that we share that story. Sharing the stories either now with our Zoom meetings, going in the very beginning. If you're a leader, kind of going into your story. If it's maybe if you have a team event, sharing your story. The shortest connection between two strangers is a story, and that story leads to inclusion, diversifies and engages the actual work environment. So it's very important. My story, and this is I put this on Instagram for a long period. I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. Years later, I couldn't be happier. Why am I my true authentic self? Since being true to myself, I couldn't have a better life. Life has its ups and downs, but it's truly much easier when you are you. So my story, very quickly, in my mid-20s, I came out. Before then, I was really leading a life of, I wasn't being who I was. I was in a career that I wasn't happy in. And right when it was not easy, but when I came out and I was who I was, it took me at least probably about 10 years to really get comfortable telling my story. And I really do enjoy sharing it now. I mean, there are times it could be it's a little nerve-wracking, but I know sharing my story helps other people, and it just, again, it creates an equitable and inclusive environment. According to the national, I'm just gonna move my screen here a little bit. Sorry about that. According to the National Storytelling Network, storytelling is interactive. Storytelling uses words. Storytelling uses actions such as vocalization, physical movement, and our gesture. Presents a story. It encourages the active imagination of the listeners. So it connects. So it's very important that we connect inclusion to storytelling. So I hope after all this, within the next few weeks or whatnot, while you're doing maybe a virtual meeting, we can kind of, again, the story doesn't have to be long. It could even be a short story, but those stories create innovation, create engagement, create a sense of belonging. Share your unique story. Encourage others to do the same. Unique experiences are assets that make us better employees, better companies, and by extension, better societies. Highlight something unique about your personal history, D&I experience, or commitment. I really can't explain enough how important inclusion is in an organization. And I really am a firm believer that with storytelling, we can create a high level of inclusive of an inclusive environment in our workplace. So most important, I really want you to be you, be your authentic self. Please remember we are in this together. I know we've heard a lot of that right now during COVID-19, but we really are. We have to work together to build an inclusive environment, to create a diverse atmosphere in our workforce. Any questions, you can always contact me, and really, truly, to be well, be safe. I know there's a lot going on right now, so please take care of yourselves, your loved ones. My information to contact me, it's aparadiso@live.com. You can find me on social media. I'm on Instagram, on Twitter, All Things App. The company that my firm is allthingsapp.com. It's right there. Any questions, you can always just email me, and I'll be more than happy to answer. And that is it. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I hope you remain safe.
Anthony, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that reminder, that powerful reminder that there's only one of each of us, and we need to be that authentic self. We need to focus on that and bring that to the table. I love that quote at the end: "The shortest connection between two people is a story." All right, so many good takeaways from that session, and I really appreciate you for sharing your heart with us, for just being open and authentic and modeling that, so we can all follow suit. Next up, I'm so excited. It was funny because I had a moment of like panic when I saw Paul talk yesterday about influence and how to drive decision making, things like that. And Joe's actually talking about some of those same things. Joe Motter is our next speaker, and Joe actually takes it in a really practical direction for recruiting and talent acquisition. So he's going to take ideas of principles of influence, ideas about social psychology, how we behave, behavioral economics, like those sorts of trends, and put those into ideas that we can use for recruiting purposes. So I'll get out of the way and let Joe share some good stuff with us.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today. My name is Joe Motter. I am the Vice President of Marketing at Brazen. Before I jump into my presentation, I just wanted to give a huge thanks and shout out to Ben Eubanks and the entire crew over at Lighthouse Research for putting together such an amazing event. I know it's tough to continue to grow and develop and learn when we can't get together in person, but I think that Ben and his team are showing through HR Summer School that that's just not the case. And for those of us that do want to continue to learn, grow, and develop, this is a great outlet to do so. So thank you to Ben. And I know I only have about 25, 30 minutes today, so I'm gonna jump right in here. So my presentation is called "How Social Psychology and Behavioral Economics Can Make You a More Persuasive Recruiter." And the agenda today, we'll skip talking about myself here. I think I've already done that, but you can follow me there on LinkedIn and Twitter. I actually do create a lot of content similar to this on LinkedIn, so I would encourage you to go ahead and connect with me there. I'd love to connect with you. But the agenda for today, it's really simple. It's two parts. First, I'm going to briefly talk about what is behavioral economics and what is social psychology, and then we're going to jump into how you can use these concepts, these techniques, in your day-to-day jobs as recruiters or talent acquisition professionals, whether you're in the weeds or you're leading people. I think that these two concepts can make you better at your job. And the reason I have gotten so passionate and so into these concepts is, as a marketer, I use this stuff all the time. Marketing's all about how do I influence, how do I persuade prospects to come consider my company, my product. In recruiting, in talent acquisition, it's just the same, except you're not going after prospects, you're going after people. How do you influence those people, persuade those people to come consider your organization? So let's jump right in here. So behavioral economics is the study of the effects of psychology, cognitive, emotional, cultural, and social factors on the decisions of individuals. And we'll get into some examples here, but you'll find that how you believe maybe you make decisions or how your colleagues, friends, family members make decisions, it doesn't necessarily always follow a logical process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here momentarily. And then social psychology is the scientific study of how people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are influenced by the actual imagined or implied presence of others. So it really comes down to decision making, but how our decisions are influenced by other people. So when we combine the two, it's really, how do we make decisions and how are people influencing our decisions? And I think you can start to see how important these two concepts are when we're talking about how do we get people, job seekers, candidates to come join our teams and work at our companies. So two very, very powerful studies here and concepts that we can use for talent acquisition. And the two books, so I'm an avid reader, and a lot of the concepts that I'm going to be sharing today do come from two books that had a big influence on my career and on this presentation. So Nudge is a book that was written right before the last economic downturn. And it really does have to do with behavioral economics. And then Robert Cialdini wrote another famous book, a great book called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. And so you'll see a lot of the themes from these two books will play a big role and big part of today's presentation. So let me start with a behavioral economics concept, or something that is really fundamental to understanding what we're going to talk about today. So the mind or the cognitive system is broken down into two subsystems. There's the automatic system and the reflective system. And the automatic system is really defined by, it's uncontrolled, it's effortless. It's associative, fast, unconscious, skilled, whereas the reflective system is a little bit more logical, controlled, effortful, deductive, slow, self-aware. And the best way really to, I think about the difference between these two is the automatic system is your gut. It's like how things feel. And the reflective system is that more logical kind of system where you slow down to think about your decision making. And so I think the best example to think about these two systems and how they differ is I want you to read this and think of the first answer that comes to mind. Don't think about it, read it, think about it, or don't think about it and just give me your answer, or think of your answer, jot it down or something. So a bat and a ball costs $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Write it down, don't think. So how many of you said the ball costs 10 cents? I'm guessing a lot of you did. Without really pausing to think about it, it is very natural to think that the ball in this scenario costs 10 cents, where in reality, the answer is that the ball costs 5 cents and the bat costs $1.05. Again, I put the little riddle or the little problem that you were supposed to solve there at the bottom to kind of see the conditions there, but bat and a ball costs $1.10. So that means, $1.05 plus 5 cents is $1.10. But if the ball costs 10 cents, that means that the bat would be $1.10 and the total would be $1.20. So the gut reaction there, the reflective, or excuse me, the non-reflective, the automatic system was thinking that it was 10 cents, which is incorrect. Your gut was incorrect in this case. And so this happens all the time in decision making. We tend to lean heavily on our gut reaction. So it's important for you to understand when you're trying to influence job seekers to come work for your company or to come do a phone screen with you or an interview with you or to apply to your company, that this is how people are making decisions. So then the other book that I mentioned before, Cialdini's book, Robert Cialdini's book, The Psychology of Influence. In his book, he talks about 6 different ways that other people can have an huge impact on our decision-making abilities. I'm going to talk about, in the rest of this presentation, 4 of those 6. And specifically, I'm going to talk about how these 4, we'll call them social psychology techniques, can help you to attract more talent. And I'll give some specific examples of recruiters or TA leaders who I know that are practicing these social psychology as well as behavioral economic decision-making techniques. Before we jump into the 4 different techniques, I want to give one more example to show you how the brain works, right? How these cognitive systems work. And the first example I'm going to give actually is about turkeys. So I know this might seem kind of strange, but stick with me here for a moment. I think it'll make sense here in the end. So I'm not sure if you know this, but baby turkeys are called chicks. And when these chicks out in the wild, researchers have studied this, and observed this, but anytime a chick starts to chirp, a mother turkey will automatically, without fail, go over to that little baby chick and first protect it and then try to feed it. And it does this over and over again without fail, like I said. And so researchers wanted to see, like, is this just like programmed into wild turkeys? And then the other thing I'll mention is that the number one enemy of a baby turkey, or excuse me, of turkeys, is the polecat. And so anytime a turkey sees a polecat, again, without fail, the mother turkey, out of a habit to protect its chicks, will start to chase the polecat to defend its family. And so what researchers did to kind of test whether all of this was just programmed into turkeys is they took a stuffed polecat and they put this polecat out into the wild near a mother turkey. And naturally, the mother turkey saw the polecat and started to try to chase it away. Now, obviously, it didn't run away, but the researchers proved that, like, look, mother turkey sees a polecat, it's going to react like it does if that were a real polecat. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The experimenters or researchers decided to record some baby chicks chirping. They got it on tape. They took that tape recording, they put it into this replica of a polecat, the stuffed polecat. And then what they did is they put the polecat back into the wild near some mother turkey. But this time they played the chirping noise in this replica of the polecat. And so this polecat actually this fake polecat starts to chirp like a baby chick. Now this time, instead of the mother turkey trying to chase that polecat away, what it does is it goes up to that replica of a polecat and like sits on it, tries to protect it, and tries to start to feed it. And so just just incredible. So kind of crazy like that. I think that is, one example of many examples that researchers have shown that the mind is programmed based on some sort of stimulus or trigger. Now you're probably thinking, Joe, come on, man. Like, humans are no way as don't act the same way as turkeys. We're on different levels. But I have a second example real quick to prove that humans are also programmed the same way. So the example here on the right is a turquoise stone. And so this takes place a few years ago. Again, this was a story in the book by Cialdini, Influence. But a few years ago, there was a woman in Arizona who owned a little souvenir shop. And she somehow got a shipment of these turquoise, stones, and thought that, hey, tourists in Arizona that come through my store might be, interested in these. They're probably prevalent in that area of the country. And so she, put them on display in the back of the store one day, put up, a price. And at the end of the day, she didn't sell any. None of the turquoise rocks were sold. So next day she's like, okay, maybe I'll move the turquoise rocks to the front of the store where more people can see them. End of the day, still no one's buying these turquoise rocks. So now she's like getting desperate. She's like, okay, what do I do? Well, she reduces the price by like half. Next day, still no one buys them. She reduces them by like a quarter. Still no one buys them. And she's just like so fed up with these turquoise rocks that she is thinking that she's just gonna have to throw them all away. But anyway, the next day she goes on a business trip, like out to New York or something. And as she's flying out to New York, she decides to email the manager of the store that day. Who's setting up the store, and she's like, hey, I'm thinking about those turquoise rocks. Can you decrease the price by like an eighth or something like that? Something crazy, like pretty much giving them away for free. She's like, we're going to give one more shot at it. Well, anyways, the next day, the owner of the store returns back to the shop and walks in and looks around. All the turquoise rocks are gone. And she asks the manager, she's like, oh, okay, great. It looks like, reducing the price to pretty much free resulted in these rocks finally getting out the door. And the manager was like, what do you mean reduce the price? I increased the original price by like 2 or 3x. So what happened here? Number one, there was obviously some sort of miscommunication in the email communication to the general manager, but actually it was a fortunate miscommunication, because when the manager raised the price of those turquoise rocks, people ended up buying them, all that sold, and they were sold out that day. And so I think what it comes down to is that humans are also programmed. And in this case, we're programmed to associate something that is expensive with quality. And this is how we navigate the world. This is how we make decisions. So let's get into these Cialdini social psychology techniques, or some of these behavioral economic concepts. So number one, reciprocity, give and take, which means we feel obligated to return a favor. And there's a great example where a professor, I think that worked with Cialdini, he sends out 100 Christmas cards right around Christmas to 100 complete strangers. These people don't know him at all. He just like went through the yellow pages or something. And some days later, or over the next week or so, this professor, this friend of Cialdini, actually receives 25 to 30 Christmas cards from these complete strangers. And it's just incredible. But it gets back to this concept of reciprocity. We feel obligated to return favors. I don't know about you, but if a stranger ever opens a door for me, I always try to, run in front of them and get the next door for them. This is just programmed in us deep, deep down. And so I think that as a recruiter, it's so important to be doing things helpful things for job seekers. Beyond just always bombarding them with the fact that you have open positions. And one of my favorite stories is by recruiter Steve Levy. Some of you might know him. He had a technical recruiting role at an engineering company, and he was trying to poach a bunch of the engineers at his biggest competitor, which was located close to where he was. And so what he did is he knew where all these engineers went for happy hour. And so one night, let's say a Thursday night at 4, before all of the engineers from his biggest competitor went out for happy hour, he decided to go to that bar, and he asks the manager, "Hey, can I put a fishbowl at the hostess stand?" And with a sign that says, "Hey, if you're an engineer at so-and-so company at his competitor, put your business card in the fishbowl. I'll buy your drinks for the happy hour period of that night. No strings attached." So anyways, next day, or later that evening, Steve goes into the bar, grabs the fishbowl, and it's just filled up with business cards from all of these engineers from his competitor. And so number one, that's great. He's got all these business cards, but that doesn't mean that anyone's actually going to take his call. Well, next day is Friday, and Steve starts going through calling all these people, and they're picking up and they're talking to Steve. And I think that eventually Steve ends up bringing in a few of them for interviews and hiring one or two. But I think the moral of the story is that all of these people felt obligated to pick up Steve's call and listen to what Steve had to say. And a few of them actually, made it through the hiring process, and Steve was able to poach and bring on some really great talent. So it's like, even with these people knowing that what Steve was up to, he knew that Steve was going to call, but because we just feel so obligated to return those favors, Steve was able to take advantage of this technique. It's pretty awesome. And then one other thing I'll add on here, another great book called Give and Take by Adam Grant. It's really an entire book about this reciprocity technique. The thing that I want you to remember and to note here is that being a giver is not good for a 100-yard dash, but it is for a marathon. Now, granted, this example I just gave was a very short term instance where this technique worked, but I want you to think about, especially now, let's say your company isn't hiring right now. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking for opportunities to give back to the community, whether that's, resume reviews, LinkedIn profile reviews, whatever it is. Just giving people job advice, taking their calls. I think that you can kind of nurture now by using reciprocity, and it's going to pay off down the road. So the next example here is liking. Next social psychology example is liking. And I think that this one's pretty straightforward too. But if people, job seekers, like you, they're more likely to say yes. And one of the best examples of this liking technique is Tupperware parties. The whole concept of a Tupperware party is, you get together, one of your friends invites you to the Tupperware party, and you get together at someone's house, and you're talking about all the different products, and you have option to buy the product, the Tupperware, at the house party. And the reason that these Tupperware parties are so effective, it comes down to this liking principle. It's not that you're buying Tupperware from a complete stranger. You're buying Tupperware from one of your friends, someone who you like. And so a great example here of how recruiters can use the liking principle. Someone who I admire greatly, Peter Brooks, he's the vice president of talent acquisition at Northrop Grumman. He does a fantastic job of building up a personal brand on social media that people tend to like. And so I just pulled an example of this post that he had on LinkedIn about this story of this intern that was applying for a job, and this intern didn't think he got the job, but he actually did in fact get the internship. And one of Peter's people who report up to him called the intern that was applying for the job, told him he got the job, and that intern was crying for joy. He was so happy, and you're just reading. This is Peter's story on LinkedIn. And the end here, he says, not gonna lie, my eyes were a little wet too. So Peter is showing that he's vulnerable, that he's a human being, that he has emotions. I mean, it's hard not to like Peter in this instance. Peter the recruiter from telling this story. And so, I know that Peter, anytime he's got job openings or he's trying to fill roles, he can lean into a network on LinkedIn, on social media, promote those roles, and he's always going to get interested people applying for those jobs because Peter is so likable, because he set himself up that way on social media. So really, really powerful technique here, which is liking. So social proof. So people will do things that they see others doing. I absolutely love this one. So an example I always use here to kind of talk about social proof is, and I usually talk about this in person at conferences, and I know this is tougher to do virtually, but just kind of pause and kind of think for yourself whether or not these things are true. So the first question I always ask people when I'm in person speaking at a conference is, do you like canned laughter? You're watching a sitcom, and do you like the canned laughter that's in a sitcom? And every single time I've asked people this, not a single hand goes up in the room. And actually, researchers have done studies, asked thousands of people, do you like canned laughter? And almost no one says that they do. But here's the thing. Again, some researchers did this experiment where they took a 30-minute sitcom. It was a new sitcom, and they had two different versions of it. One was with no canned laughter dubbed or added to the sitcom at all, and the other one had canned laughter. And they had two different audiences watch the two different versions. And then they asked some questions afterwards to the group that didn't have the canned laughter and the group that did have canned laughter. And here's what the results were. The group that had the canned laughter laughed longer, more frequently, and harder at the jokes across the entire episode than the people who didn't have the canned laughter added to the show. And so I think that is, again, one of these things that we're just programmed. We don't even realize it. We don't realize that we're doing it. That when we hear our peers, when we hear people, we hear laughter, even if it's fake, we're like more into that joke. We laugh longer, harder, more frequently. And so I think that, the social proof concept, I know many of you are probably already kind of making that leap to what I'm going to say, but this is why it's just so important to have a Glassdoor strategy, to leverage the reviews and the ratings on Glassdoor, because job seekers are going there. And they're looking. We all buy products on Amazon. We all look at restaurant reviews on Yelp. Well, maybe not right now, unfortunately, but maybe through DoorDash delivery. And we're actually using complete strangers' reviews to make decisions about products, about restaurants, about takeout, delivery. And the same thing goes for job seekers. And so I know there's a gentleman who, director of TA at Children's Phoenix Hospital. He always told me that it's so important in order to improve your Glassdoor strategy. It's so important to talk to new employees when they join your company, like within the first week, 2 weeks, and talk to them. Ask them, did they use Glassdoor? Number one, to make a decision about coming to work at, let's say, your company, at his company. And a lot of people told this director of TA that in fact they did use Glassdoor. And so by kind of showing your new employees how important Glassdoor was for them, I think you can use that as a way to extend them or motivate them to go leave reviews themselves on Glassdoor. And I know this director of TA who was telling me these stories, was able to increase the activity on Glassdoor in just a couple months and increase ratings across the board for like the company, for the CEO. And so Glassdoor is very, very important to the process. And I think that there's some little things you can do, low hanging fruit, to get more of your employees to use Glassdoor. So the last one here, and I know I just have a minute or two left here, is this principle of authority. People defer to experts and those that they perceive as in a position of authority. I think that this social psychology and behavioral economic technique speaks to the importance of getting your hiring managers involved in the process. I think that the Ben Eubanks and Lighthouse Research actually has a stat that says that hiring manager videos, for example, are like 10 times more powerful at influencing job seekers than if a recruiter is doing a video. And so it is so important. And I think you can use this sort of data, and you can use this fact here that it really does influence people, to influence your hiring managers to get more involved in the process. So I know this last one here was kind of quick, but yeah, those are 4 techniques, social psychology and behavioral economic techniques that you can use in your day-to-day to help better persuade job seekers. You can tap into their minds, tap into their minds that are already programmed to do things based on certain triggers. Use these techniques to increase the likelihood that you're going to bring in top talent. So thank you everybody for joining me here today. And we might have a minute or two here to answer any questions. If not, please shoot me an email, joe.motter@brazen.com, and I would be happy to answer any other questions that you have. But thank you so much. And thank you, Ben, and your team for an awesome virtual conference.
That was fun to see Joe sharing those ideas and really making them tie in and applicable and actionable for us. Ideas and stories, and connecting that into how we can recruit better. Again, it's fun to see the thread this week kind of weaving through. And I think Katrina Collier tomorrow is actually going to talk about this too, is how we can be more human in our recruiting and our talent practices leads to better outcomes. Okay, here we go. Our last fireside chat before we take a breather today. I have Jameson Smith. We're going to talk about talent acquisition as well. We're going to dive into the science of hiring, talk about some of the data there, some of the things that tell us how we can hire better and hire the right people. Here we go. Hey everyone, welcome back to another HR Summer School Fireside Chat. I hope you've enjoyed these. I have really enjoyed the keynotes, the conversations, everything else, but I really just love being able to dig into different pieces, nuances of HR and talent with these different experts. And this next conversation is no exclusion there. So I just want to bring on our guest. We're going to dive right into this. Jameson, welcome to the conversation.
Hey, thanks so much, Ben. I appreciate
Absolutely.
you having me here. Pretty excited about this, and I love what you guys are doing with HR Summer School.
Well, thank you. It has been so much fun. Someone said the other day, like, this is, you must be so proud. I'm like, I'm proud of all the speakers, the people who are showing up, like killing it, bringing great stuff for the audience. And so I'm just honored to be part of this. I'm thankful for it too. So tell us a little about yourself. Tell us what you do and some details about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a little bit of a background. So for everybody out there in the audience, thanks for joining us. So my name is Jameson Smith. I am an account executive for a small tech startup company called Vervo. If you're not familiar with the Vervo brand, essentially we are a skills testing software provider that really helps companies identify top performers for virtually any role inside their company without bias. A little bit more about my background too. So to make everybody aware, I am still rather new to Vervo. I've been with the company for about 6 months now, but I'm certainly no stranger to the talent acquisition space. In fact, I like to tell folks that I'm about a 15-year veteran in talent acquisition, doing everything from employment branding, helping clients with diversity strategies and initiatives, OFCCP compliance. But part of the reason that I came to Vervo is because last year I got very much interested in the artificial intelligence space within talent acquisition and what some companies are doing and how these types of services are benefiting companies. And a fantastic opportunity opened up with Vervo. And I am so excited and passionate about joining their mission, which is to really make hiring based on merit as opposed to background with what you see on a resume. So I'm excited to be here, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing today.
Awesome. Very cool. I had forgotten about your background across that. As you're talking, I'm thinking back to the first recruiting job I ever had. I was actually recruiting Black Hawk helicopter instructor pilots, of all things. And you're like, yeah, when you start out recruiting, that's the first thing you dip your toe into, right? And then it's like throw you in the deep end and say, good luck. Hopefully you survive, and maybe you'll actually find a candidate out there. So it's been a interesting kind of career journey there for me on the recruiting side. So I'm excited to talk about hiring as part of this.
Absolutely.
We've talked about some different things in these other fireside chats, but hiring has been one of them, and that's one of the conversations. Whether we're doing it right now or we're planning to do it in the future, everyone's got their hands in that. So one of the things I want to kind of start with, just to get into like the thick of things, if you don't mind. I am a numbers nerd, a data nut. Everybody knows that about me. But hiring validity, right? You talked about hiring for merit, not just based on how well someone writes a resume. And I'm kind of curious, what does that look like? How do you actually do that? Because it seems the resume is the standard, the format, like the de facto way of how we evaluate candidates. And it seems like almost a pipe dream to say, hey, we're going to hire based on merit and your actual capabilities versus what you have done in the past.
Yep. And honestly, even though the market is changing quite a bit, I think that dynamic exists a lot for companies because there's still so many companies out there and HR leaders that, depending where they are in their careers, they still think, we can just get a bunch of resumes. We can evaluate the resumes. We can look at how long somebody's been in a particular role, what kind of experience they have, and just base their hiring decision off that piece of paper. But you have to agree that given companies do face a big challenge with turnover, that means that they're not always making the right hires when they're going off of the resume, right? And you have to agree that in many cases, some candidates are better at writing resumes than others. So it's not always factual data, right? You could have somebody who, maybe they're just not a great writer, but they're making their best effort to put forth their thoughts on paper and submit themselves, and they might be a great candidate versus somebody who goes out there and spends extra money getting somebody to write a resume for them, professional services. Who's the better candidate, right? You really don't know. So to your point, when we talk about validity, right, hiring validity, the belief in what we're doing here at Vervo is to actually test skills, right? And when you think about validity, let's look at it from a very high level, right? We'll define what validity actually means for the audience, right? It's right out of the dictionary. The definition is it's the quality of being logically or factually sound. That's validity. So our approach to how we make a skills test or an assessment valid is to actually audition somebody, right? If you want something to be valid, put a candidate in a scenario that they will experience at your job and see how they perform in that role. And again, Ben, this is just from a very high level, right? But I mean, you could take things so much further when you get into the psychology of it, like the various stages and levels of what validity is, whether you're talking about base validity, construct validity, content validity. There's different aspects to it that we take into consideration, but just as a very high level, it's can somebody do the job? If you put them in a scenario, can they execute those basic functions of the job? That's what will validate somebody's performance.
That is awesome. I love the idea of if you're going to be a bicycle rider, we're going to put you on a bicycle and see if you can ride it, and we'll find out.
Absolutely.
We'll see if that's a capability that you have.
Yeah. The beauty of it is too, it's like, and we try to take that different approach for clients, right? Like to your point, if you can ride a bicycle, it's like we think about the candidates and what they're going to be exposed to. Like if you're somebody that's going to be developing code, we have a way to show that you can write code, right? Take a coding challenge. If you're in sales and you're going to be writing a lot of emails, hey, step into a Word document and create an email. If you're in finance and you need to create financial statements, show us how you do it, right? And that's exactly what we're doing.
So awesome. I love that. So taking that the next step further, logically, right? You'll be able to see candidates, what they can do and everything else. But one of the questions that I get, and one of the gripes, one of the complaints I get when I'm talking to candidates and we're doing research with them, because we like to survey not just employers, what they're doing, but also the candidates, the employee populations, to figure out what their feelings are. And candidates are sometimes a little bit perturbed, we'll say, because, hey, I took this assessment and then, I still didn't get the job. I'm kind of bothered by that. Is it different when a candidate's doing some generic, like I'm answering 100 questions about my integrity or something that seems kind of just vague, versus someone that's taking one of those tests that's compared to the actual job that we're doing? Do they see that differently? Is it a better experience essentially?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. It's like I've actually got like so many different answers. Like I could go on and on about that particular question because you can break it down into different kind of areas. But first and foremost, what we stress is candidate experience, right? Like, so you just mentioned, for instance, somebody who steps into a test and the candidates just get a list of 50 questions taking a survey, but you know what, that survey might not be relevant to what they're going to go through anyway. And certainly having a list of 50 multiple choice questions is not very engaging. Nobody wants to go through that. So what I would stress to HR leaders and talent acquisition leaders who are considering, what's my next strategy? What's my approach to making skills testing or assessments valid, is to put the candidate at the center of the process, right? Make it engaging, make sure that the points are relevant, right? Again, is what you're sharing with them representative of the job? Because if it's not, and even if they perform well, ultimately, you're going to find that they may not be a great fit for the organization, then you're still facing turnover, right? So you want to correct that by making sure that the skills test or the assessment is actually representative of that work that they're going to be expected to do. But try to make the test fun, right? So our belief is don't just hit them with a bunch of multiple choice questions. Like put them in scenarios, make it engaging, where instead of say, hey, here's 5 multiple choice answers, check one. No, actually go in and we will give you a scenario. We're going to create something where we then see your behavior and you have to respond in a text, or you have to respond in a video, or you might have a coding challenge for somebody and you know that they can write code, but you followed it up with a question saying, in the previous coding challenge, here's what we asked you to do. Explain your methodology, right? And that's what gets candidates excited. And then the last piece of it is make sure that you're talking, you're communicating with those candidates, right? So one of the things that we do with that approach is we collect data, right? Similar to an NPS score. We ask the candidates, what are your thoughts about taking this challenge? Like, do you like it? How would you rank it? Provide some feedback and let us know your thoughts. We collect all of that data. And in most instances, we get very, very high NPS scores back. But we also take the comments that candidates are sharing and we provide that feedback to the clients to actually help them make decisions on how can we make these tests better for the candidate, right? In a more engaging experience. And then there's that level of constant improvement. And then the last thing I might focus on too, as I said, I could go on about this topic all day long, is you made a good point about candidates that get into the process, but then they don't get that consistent feedback, or they're kind of perturbed because they don't know where they fall. I'd stress to HR leaders too, that as you're going through this type of a process, make sure that you've got a system in place to communicate with your candidates so that they always know where they stand. If they get online to take an assessment, send them the assessment, welcome them, explain it to them. When they complete them, let them know that you've actually received the assessment, that somebody's looking at it. If you decide they're not the right candidate, send them an email, let them know. You can have systems automatically do all of that for you based on certain thresholds. So at least those candidates know whether they're progressing or if they've fallen out for some reason. So the communication is really important.
The thing that gets me is we often treat all candidates that don't get the job as the same category of candidates. And it could have been that you had, out of 100 people, you had one that got it. There were 3 that were really, really close. They were phenomenal. They were almost perfect, but they just didn't have that one thing, or couldn't make the money work, or you couldn't make one detail work out, but they otherwise would have been a perfect candidate for it. And when we fail to follow up with the candidates, or fail to tell them where they are in the process, fail to engage with them, the other 96 candidates that were good but were never going to get the job, we treat those other 3 candidates that might consider a future job with us, if we treat them well, we treat them like everyone else. And
Absolutely.
like, I'm with you on that. We need to be communicating better. And that was one of the, it's not easy. It's not fun to tell someone they didn't get the job. But from a candidate perspective, our data actually say that candidates don't mind hearing that they didn't get the job, as long as they know that you really looked at them and considered them and treated them like they were a legitimate candidate. If you get that automated, thanks but no thanks email 4 minutes after you apply for the job, that's not nearly as comforting as getting that notice saying, we looked at what you have, we appreciate your time, we appreciate your interest, we evaluated on these factors, and this is how it picked the people. So,
again, it's funny too, to that point. It's like I've got a good industry friend that always used to use the phrase that unlike fine wine, bad news doesn't get better with time. You're better off just delivering that message to the candidate and letting them know where they stand, and let them go about their lives. Let them go after another job, so that they're not just sitting there hoping and praying. Just communicate. Communication is so critically important on every side of the fence. It just really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I was trying to figure out, that brought to mind Dan Pink's latest book is When, the Science of Timing and When to Do Things. And one of the things he found in that was, if you're giving someone, we always hear like, do you want the bad news or the good news? The research shows, give them the bad news first and then the good news second. Finish on an upswing is basically what the research shows is the best option. And if I'm being like, hey, you did get the job, but here's what we found out about you. Here are some strengths we found out from your assessment, or here's some other good news about you. We do have other positions available, and here's how I don't know, like, we can think through what those could be. And I didn't mean to like spin wheels on that, but I've popped up. There's actually some data out there that say, don't hold out, don't wait, don't hold off, because not knowing is better than knowing and moving on emotionally.
Absolutely.
In terms of
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more, Ben.
So if someone wants to connect with you, I realize we're getting kind of close on our time. If someone wants to connect with you, learn more about the work that Vervo is doing, because I'm a fan of the work the team is doing. I'm not shy about that. I'm excited about us. We didn't even talk about the bias piece of this today, right? But if we can
get into that,
look at different candidates and evaluate them based on their actual abilities, their merits, their value and strengths. We're not looking at what school they went to, whether they're friends with some other hiring manager. We're ignoring all those other things that could potentially bias us against certain candidates. And I love that about the approach you guys are doing. So anyway, again, I'm fanboy a little bit, but there we go. If someone wants to
in fact, I'll make it real quick, because I know we're kind of running into time, but that's the one thing, is like we really didn't get into the nuts and bolts of artificial intelligence and how it all does it. But to your point, that's the beauty, because we're not looking at the schooling, we're not looking at where they work, the name of the company, the brand. I don't care if you're male, you're female, what your political affiliation is. Like, none of that. It doesn't matter. It just matters, can you do the job? Here's the task. Show me what you can do. That's all we care about, and that's what the AI looks at.
Awesome. So the question I started and then rambled off of was, if someone wants to learn more or connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. I mean, I don't know if you want me to go ahead and give a number and an email address on here, but
throw your LinkedIn out there. People can reach you there probably.
Yeah. So my LinkedIn is right out there. So it's my first name spelled a little bit different, Jaimison. Last name is Smith, so I leave that up to everybody. So Jameson Smith. The company is Vervo, VERVOE. What I would suggest to everybody, check out the website. You can actually sign up there for a demo request. That's actually going to come into me anyway. So one way or the other, you're going to end up getting in touch with me. But check out the website, see what we have to offer. If you have questions, again, I'd love to connect with you and see what I can do to help you with some of the challenges that you may be facing.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, Jameson, I appreciate you joining me. And again, just a chance to talk about hiring, the science behind it. We often treat it like it's an art, but there is some science, and we can blend those together to get the best results. I really appreciate you spending some time chatting with me about it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me, Ben. This was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir. To everybody else, stay tuned for more HR Summer School coming right up. All right, we are done with the first half of the day. We're going to take a breather, take a break. Whew, let me catch my breath a little bit. We're going to have intermission. We have live trivia, same as every day. The link there, probably you could have guessed it already. For those of you who want to play the trivia game, you're welcome to. Those questions are hard, darn it. I feel like I've won the lottery if I get one or two of those right, but hey, have some fun with it. I do want to let you guys know, and we'll be sharing this out after the event and as we continue to go, but speaker handouts we already have, the slides that we already have, we're getting all the rest of them in for the speakers, but the ones we already have, hrsummerschool.org/resources. hrsummerschool.org/resources. We're also putting together a page there if you are one of the people who's watching this, participating, that is out of work, that is looking for a job, that has been laid off, that has lost your role through no fault of your own. We have a link there right above the speaker resources for you to click in and put in your information. If you want for people to reach out to you, we're going to encourage those people here who are employed that are looking for other talent in HR and learning, HR talent and learning, looking for people like you to reach out there. So we're going to help build that out. You can just click into that spreadsheet. The link is there, and you can add your information. People can find you. Speaker resources, the ones we have already are there. The ones we don't have yet will be coming. Hang tight on that. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back. We are going to break the transmission, break the broadcast in the next few minutes or so. We'll break that halfway through. We'll come back with 5 minutes left in the intermission on the new streaming link. LinkedIn is making it so challenging for everybody to join. I've answered about 70 emails this morning from people trying to get in and finally able to. The trick is you have to make sure you are marked as an attendee, as attending the HR Summer School event on LinkedIn. Scroll down a little bit once you've marked that, and you'll see the live stream playing right there. So you don't have to go to different places. The link should not change. It should be the same place. Trying to make it as easy as possible. And again, they've got all these other hurdles that make it kind of fun. So I appreciate you, all of you, for bearing with us on that. So we're trying to figure out the best way to get you access and to make it easy for you to get in and consume this. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.